The air in the private room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. On one side of the table, a $500 million deal that would change the face of global energy. On the other, a furious billionaire, Charles Beaumont, watching it all disintegrate. His translator was gone. His partners were insulted. The deal was dead. He didn't know that his salvation wasn't in an app or an emergency call, but was standing in the corner, holding a silver water pitcher, wearing a $30 apron. The Aegis Club wasn't a restaurant. It was a fortress of wealth. Located on the 65th floor of a midtown Manhattan spire, its windows didn't just overlook Central Park, they judged it. The carpets were so thick they absorbed all sound, all except for the quiet, rhythmic clink of Sinclair Mitchell's heels on the marble threshold of the kitchen. Sinclair was invisible, and she liked it that way. At 26, she should have been in a boardroom, not polishing silverware. She had a master's degree in Slavic studies and a near-photographic memory for syntax. She spoke 4 languages fluently, including a deep, nuanced command of Russian that few non-natives ever achieved. Her grandmother, a refugee from another era, had spoken it to her as a child, and Sinclair had perfected it in college, fascinated by its depth and complexity. But degrees didn't pay for her father's catastrophic medical bills or the subsequent bankruptcy. So Sinclair Mitchell, who could have been negotiating treaties, was instead negotiating the precise placement of a lemon twist on a $40 glass of sparkling water. She worked doubles. Her feet were a geography of blisters. Her hands were rough from bleach and hot plates, but her mind was sharp, and she watched. Oh, how she watched. She saw the lies, the affairs, the fragile egos of the men who ran the world. She saw them at their most powerful and their most pathetic. Tonight, the most powerful and, potentially, the most pathetic was in private dining room 3. Charles Beaumont. Beaumont was a titan, a shark, a man whose picture was on the cover of Forbes, not for what he'd built, but for what he'd crushed. He ran Beaumont Innovations, a ruthless tech and energy conglomerate. He was wearing a dark Brioni suit that probably cost more than Sinclair's car, and his Patek Philippe watch, a Refn 5270 she noted, gleamed every time he impatiently tapped his fingers on the table. He was waiting for one man, not a delegation, a single mythic figure. Nikolai Volkov. Volkov was an old-world titan of industry, a post-Soviet billionaire who had built an empire from the ground up in mining and rare earth minerals. He was reclusive, powerful, and deeply traditional. He held the patents to a new extraction method that would make Beaumont's renewable energy division untouchable. This $500 million deal wasn't just about money, it was about dominance, and as the entire business world knew, Nikolai Volkov, as a matter of pure, stubborn principle, refused to speak English in business dealings. He felt his language had been dismissed by the West for decades, and he now forced the world to come to him. Sinclair's job was simple: keep the water filled, the bread baskets full, and disappear. At 7:05 p.m., Volkov arrived. He was in his late 60s, with a hard, unsmiling face and eyes that looked like chips of ice. He was flanked by 2 stone-faced aides. He didn't just enter the room, he occupied it. Charles, by contrast, shot up from his chair and clapped Volkov on the shoulder. "Nikolai, glad you could make it. Let's get this done." Sinclair, standing by the service station, winced. She knew enough about Russian etiquette to know the casual first-name basis and the backslap were profound insults to a man of Volkov's stature. Volkov's face registered nothing, which was worse than anger. "We are pleased to be here, Mr. Beaumont," one of Volkov's aides said, in precise, British-accented English. "Great, great," Charles boomed, waving them to their seats. His own translator, a nervous-looking man named Gregory, sat beside him, shuffling papers. Charles's lead assistant, Brenda, a woman with a severe haircut and a permanently stressed expression, stood against the wall. "Sinclair water! Now!" Brenda snapped, not even looking at her. Sinclair glided forward, her face a perfect mask of professional neutrality. She poured the still water for the Russians and the sparkling for Charles. "So," Charles started, leaning forward, "let's cut to the chase. The terms are on the table. We're offering a premium, more than anyone else. You sign with us, you're set." Gregory, the translator, began to speak in Russian. Sinclair listened with half an ear as she retreated. His Russian was sloppy. It was textbook Russian, but it was impersonal. He was failing to use the all-important Otchestvo, the patronymic middle name that is the bedrock of respect. He was calling the man Gospodin Volkov, Mr. Volkov, when he should have been addressing him, at least part of the time, by his full, respected name. Volkov replied in calm, deep Russian. Sinclair understood him perfectly. He was saying, "Mr. Beaumont, your offer is indeed generous, but it is the legacy of my life's work we are here to discuss, not just the price. The future of my people and my research is as important as the valuation." Gregory translated this as, "He says the money is good, but he wants to talk about the legacy." Close, but not really. Gregory had missed the entire emotional core of the statement. He'd translated the words, not the dusha, the soul, behind them. Charles, of course, heard only what he wanted. "Legacy, right? Of course. My team, your team, will be one big happy family," Charles said dismissively. The first course was served in tomb-like silence. Sinclair moved in and out, clearing plates. The tension was building. Volkov was speaking quietly to his aides in Russian. "They seem hesitant," Charles muttered to Brenda. "Gregory, what are they saying?" Brenda whispered. Gregory strained to listen. They're talking about the server, I think. Something about the fish." Sinclair froze for a microsecond. They weren't talking about the fish. The aide had just said, "This man's translator is a fool. He speaks like a common street vendor. Does he think our chairman is one too?" Sinclair kept her face blank, collected Charles's plate, and backed away. This was a disaster waiting to happen. And she had a front row seat. The appetizer plates were cleared. The main course was 10 minutes out, and Gregory, the translator, stood up. "Excuse me, Mr. Beaumont," he whispered, his face pale and slick with sweat. I need to use the restroom. Terribly sorry." Fine, just be quick," Charles snapped, annoyed at the interruption. Gregory scurried out of the room. Charles, left alone with Volkov, attempted small talk. "So, Nikolai, you like chess?" Volkov's aide translated. Volkov nodded politely and said in Russian, "I find it a useful crucible for observing a person's character in the face of adversity." Charles, not waiting for a translation that wasn't coming, just grinned. Good. We'll have to play." 5 minutes passed. The silence in the room stretched thin. Charles's leg began to bounce. "Brenda, where the hell is Gregory?" he hissed. "I'll check, sir," Brenda said, slipping out of the room. Sinclair entered again to pour more wine. The doors swung shut behind her, sealing her in with the mounting dread. Charles was checking his watch. Volkov was sitting with his hands folded, perfectly patient, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been angry. The door opened. Brenda returned, her face ashen. She leaned down and whispered something in Charles's ear. Sinclair was across the room, but she saw the blood drain from Charles's face. His bravado vanished, replaced by a raw, primal panic. What do you mean he's not there? Charles's voice was a low growl. His phone is in the bathroom, Brenda whispered back, frantic. I found it on the sink. He's gone. He just left. He's not in the lobby. Security can't find him. Get him back. I'm trying. His coat is still at coat check. I think he might have had a panic attack. He looked ill. I don't care if he's having a heart attack. That's a $500 million signature sitting at this table. Charles looked at Volkov, who was watching this exchange with polite curiosity. Charles forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. My apologies. A small technical difficulty. He pulled out his phone. Brenda, get the Warsaw office on a video call. Now. Get anyone who speaks a word of this. It's 2 a.m. in Warsaw, sir, and they speak Polish. I don't care. Get someone. Charles turned back to the table, phone in hand. He typed something. The phone's robotic voice squawked out a phrase in tinny, digitized Russian. Sinclair cringed so hard she almost dropped her pitcher. The translation app. It had just used the most informal, panmol, low-form language. It was the equivalent of a stranger walking up to a CEO and saying, Davai, Starik. Come on, old man. Volkov's eyes widened. The aides looked at each other in genuine, undisguised horror. This wasn't just an insult. It was a detonation. Volkov spoke, his voice no longer calm. It was sharp, cold, and final. He spoke in Russian, and Sinclair's blood ran cold. This is not a technical difficulty, Mr. Beaumont. This is a profound and deliberate display of disrespect. You have wasted our time. We have traveled 13 hours for this meeting, only to be met with arrogance, incompetence, and now, this toy. He gestured to the phone. This meeting is over. The deal is off. We will be taking our patents to your competitors. I am sure Mr. Hewitt will be more prepared. Leland Hewitt, Charles's most hated rival. This was a kill shot. Charles, of course, understood none of it. He just saw the Russians standing up, folding their napkins. No, wait! Charles shouted, standing up himself. Brenda, do something! Stop them! Sir, I don't... Brenda was pale. Nikolai, please, sit! Charles was gesturing wildly, his composure shattered. He was just a terrified man in a $10,000 suit. Volkov's aide replied in English, his voice dripping with ice. Mr. Volkov has instructed me to inform you that this engagement is concluded. Good evening. They were turning to leave. $500 million was walking out the door. Charles's career, his reputation for invincibility, was evaporating. Sinclair stood by the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was not her problem. This was not her world. She was just the waitress. She should just let them walk. She should let this arrogant man, who hadn't even bothered to learn her name, fail. It would serve him right. But she also heard what Volkov said. He'd mentioned Leland Hewitt. Sinclair's father's business hadn't just failed. It had been destroyed by a predatory acquisition, led by a subsidiary of Hewitt's. She saw Charles's panic. She saw Volkov's offense, and she saw an opening, a terrifying, career-ending, life-changing opening. Before her brain could stop her, she put the water pitcher down on the service station with a quiet click. She took one step forward. Mr. Beaumont, Sinclair said, her voice quiet but clear. Charles spun around. What? Get out! Can't you see I'm... Gospodin Volkov, Sinclair said, cutting Charles off. She turned to the Russian delegation and inclined her head respectfully. And then, in flawless, formal Russian, she spoke. Gospodin Volkov, proszu proszczenia za eto wtorgnienie. Mr. Volkov, I beg your pardon for this intrusion. Please forgive this grievous interruption and the perceived disrespect. My name is Sinclair Mitchell, I am a humble server here, but I am also a student of your culture and your language. What you have witnessed tonight is not a reflection of Mr. Beaumont's true intention, but rather a catastrophic failure of circumstance. Please, I beg you, do not allow the incompetence of one man to destroy the potential of this partnership. Give us 5 minutes. That is all I ask. The room went absolutely silent. You could hear the ventilation system hum. Charles and Brenda stared, their mouths open. Nikolai Volkov, who was halfway to the door, stopped. He turned around, his eyes locking on Sinclair for the very first time. He didn't look at her like she was a waitress. He looked at her like she was a puzzle. He studied her for a long, heavy moment. Then he spoke back to her in Russian. "You are a server here?" "Yes, господин," Sinclair replied, still in Russian. Circumstances demanded it. "Your accent? It is perfect. Your use of the patronymic is forgotten by many. Where did you learn?" "My grandmother taught me, sir. I perfected it at Columbia. I believe in honoring the old ways." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched Volkov's lips. A rare belief in this city. "You are very bold, Miss Mitchell. And you work for him?" He motioned to Charles. "Tonight, sir, I find myself working for this deal," Sinclair replied. Volkov looked at Charles, whose face was a mask of utter confusion. He looked back at Sinclair. 5 minutes, Volkov said in English, sitting back down. "Let us hear what this student of our culture has to say." Charles collapsed into his chair, staring at Sinclair as if she had just sprouted wings. "Sinclair," he whispered, "what in the holy hell is going on?" Sinclair turned to him, her invisibility cloak completely gone. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice steady and cold. "Please be quiet. I believe I am your new translator." The power dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it inverted. A moment ago, Charles Beaumont was the king, and Sinclair Mitchell was the help. Now, she was the only bridge over a $500 million chasm, and he was the one holding on for dear life. "Brenda, get her a chair," Charles stammered. "No," Sinclair said, not looking at him. She remained standing. It was a position of service, which put the Russians at ease, but it was also a position of control. She commanded the floor. "Mr. Beaumont, Mr. Volkov is under the impression that your use of a translation app was a deliberate, final insult, proving you are not a serious person." "What? No! I was desperate," Charles protested. Sinclair turned to Mr. Volkov and spoke in Russian. "Господин Volkov, Mr. Beaumont is mortified. He says it was an act of pure panic, not malice. He apologizes for the technological vulgarity. He was, and I am translating his emotion here, not his words. He was terrified of losing the honor of your consideration." This was the first rule of real translation. You don't translate what is said, you translate what is meant. Volkov listened, his expression softening fractionally. His desperation is understandable, but his translator, he was incompetent. And then he fled. This does not inspire confidence. Sinclair translated this for Charles. Tell him Gregory is fired. He's finished. He'll never work in this city again." Charles spat. Sinclair took a breath. "Господин Volkov, Mr. Beaumont shares your assessment of the man's skills. He assures me that the man's career in this field is over. He was a last-minute replacement for Mr. Beaumont's top analyst, who is ill." A white lie, but a necessary one. Mr. Beaumont believes that a crisis reveals true character. He asks that you judge him on how he resolves this crisis, not on how it began. Volkov nodded slowly. "A fair point. Very well. Let us return to the central issue. Your translator, Ms. Mitchell, is Better. But the problem remains. Mr. Beaumont's contract, as written, is an acquisition, not a partnership. He wants to buy my life's work, put his name on it, and shelve my research team. I am not a company for sale. I am a legacy to be built upon. Sinclair translated this. Charles's face hardened. That's the sticking point. Listen, Sinclair, tell him this. We are buying it. That's the deal. We pay them $500 million. We own the patent. That's how it works. I'm not partnering, so they can second-guess my marketing strategy. Tell him. Sinclair paused. She was trapped. If she translated that directly, the deal was dead again. Charles's words were a club. Volkov required a scalpel. Mr. Beaumont, Sinclair said, turning to him. If I say that, he will walk. I am telling you, right now. He is not here to sell his child, as he sees it. He is here to find it a new home where it can grow. Your contract uses the word acquisition 42 times. The word partnership appears twice, both times in the context of liability. Charles stared at her. You've read the contract? I saw a copy on Brenda's laptop when she left it open at the service bar an hour ago, Sinclair said, omitting that she'd read and memorized the entire 12-page summary in 90 seconds. The problem, sir, is not the money. It's the face. Mr. Volkov cannot return to Moscow and tell his board he simply sold his legacy. He must return and say he secured its future. Charles's eyes narrowed. He was a brute, but he wasn't stupid. He was finally seeing the shape of the lock, and he was seeing that Sinclair was the key. What do you suggest? He said, the words tasting like acid in his mouth. I suggest you let me handle this point, she said. She turned back to Mr. Volkov. Господин Volkov, Mr. Beaumont understands your concern completely. The language of the contract is rigid. It is an American legal document, and it lacks dusha, soul. Mr. Beaumont's intention is to provide your technology with the global platform it deserves. He asks me to ask you, what would you call this new home? Volkov was impressed. She had just initiated a negotiation, not a demand. We would call it the Volkov-Beaumont Initiative, Volkov said, a joint venture. My research team continues their work, funded by Beaumont Innovations. Your marketing and logistics teams bring it to the world. The profits are shared, 60-40, Sinclair translated. 60-40, he's insane, Charles exploded. He thinks he can just, no, the deal is 100% acquisition, maybe 80-20 at worst. Mr. Beaumont, we are no longer at 80-20, Sinclair said calmly. We are at 0. He is holding all the cards. Your translator vanished. You insulted him. You have no leverage. Let me counter. Fine, but 60-40 is a non-starter. Sinclair turned back. Господин Volkov, Mr. Beaumont is deeply honored by the proposal of a joint venture. The Volkov-Beaumont Initiative is an excellent name. He proposes a 70-30 split in his favor, given that he is providing the $500 million capital infusion, the entire global distribution network, and absorbing 100% of the market risk. Volkov considered this. 70-30. The risk is indeed great, but my technology is the foundation. It is the land. He is merely building the house. 65-35, Sinclair translated. No, 70-30, Charles snapped. Sinclair looked at Charles. Sir, this is not a negotiation about 5%. This is a cultural negotiation about respect. He is offering you a compromise. If you accept it, he feels you value his contribution. If you fight him on this last 5%, he will feel you are the same arrogant American you were an hour ago. Take the deal. Charles glared at her. His entire body was tense. He was a man who never gave in. You're a waitress. What do you know about? I know, Sinclair said, her voice dropping, that he mentioned Leland Hewitt. I know Hewitt has been wining and dining his aides in Moscow for a month. I know that Hewitt will gladly give him 60-40, just to see you ruined. This is the only deal on the table, Mr. Beaumont. The question is, do you want to win, or do you want to be right? The silence stretched. Charles's jaw worked. He hated her. He hated her for being right. He hated her for saving him. Fine, Charles bit out. Fine. 65-35. Sinclair turned, a smooth professional smile on her face. Gospodin Volkov, Mr. Beaumont is delighted. He agrees that 65-35 is an eminently fair reflection of the partnership and the risk. He accepts your terms. Volkov's face broke into a genuine smile for the first time. He stood and inclined his head to Sinclair, who nodded back. Then he nodded to Charles. Excellent, Volkov said in English. He gestured to his aide. My lawyers will draw up the amendments. We will sign in the morning. The tension broke like a fever. The room was suddenly full of energy. The aides were smiling. Charles was laughing, a horrible, barking sound of relief. Sinclair, you're a miracle, he boomed, clapping her on the shoulder as he had done to Volkov. Sinclair fought the urge to flinch. Brenda, get champagne. The best we have. Not this swill, Charles yelled. As Brenda, looking utterly defeated, scurried out, the main course finally arrived. The waiters, Sinclair's colleagues, filed in, their eyes wide with confusion at seeing Sinclair standing at the head of the table next to the billionaire. Sinclair just stepped back, retrieving her water pitcher. She began to quietly refill Mr. Volkov's glass, slipping back into the role of the invisible server. But Volkov stopped her. He placed his hand gently on her arm. Miss Mitchell, he said in Russian, his voice quiet and for her alone. A person of your talent should not be pouring water. A person must do what is necessary to survive, Gospodin, she replied, also in Russian. Survival is one thing, thriving is another, he said. He looked at her, his eyes sharp. That was not just translation. You understood the subtext, the part about Hewitt, the 5%. You knew. I watch, Sinclair said simply. Be careful, Ms. Mitchell, Volkov said, his voice a whisper. The man you just saved, he is not a man who likes to be saved. A wolf who is helped by a lamb is still a wolf. I am not a lamb, sir, Sinclair said. Volkov smiled. No, I see that now. The champagne flowed. Charles was in full-blown celebration mode, telling a story about a yacht in Monaco that none of the Russians found interesting, but they smiled politely. Sinclair had translated the bonhomie, smoothing Charles's rough edges, turning his boasts into anecdotes. The deal was done. The tension was gone. But for Sinclair, a new cold unease was settling in. Gregory, the translator. It didn't add up. A man doesn't just flee a $500 million deal, leaving his phone and coat behind because of a panic attack. Not without a trace. He would have been found in a stairwell, or security would have seen him leave. But Brenda said he'd just vanished. Brenda herself was a wreck. She was hovering by Charles's side, her smile plastered on, but her eyes were darting nervously toward the door. Every time it opened, she jumped. Sinclair needed a moment. Mr. Beaumont, excuse me, she said quietly. I need to check on the dessert service. Of course, whatever you need, Charles said magnanimously. Sinclair slipped out of the private dining room. The main restaurant was bustling, a stark contrast to the bubble of high-stakes drama she'd just left. She walked not toward the kitchen, but toward the restrooms, her mind racing. She passed the men's room where Brenda had found Gregory's phone. She continued down the hall to the security office, a small room tucked behind a staff-only door. A guard named Frank was watching the monitors. Hey, Sinclair, rough night in PDR 3. Heard some yelling. You have no idea, Frank, Sinclair said, leaning against the console. Listen, you were on when that translator, Gregory, disappeared, right? Yeah, weirdest thing, Frank said, rewinding one of the feeds. The assistant, Brenda, came out in a panic, said he'd vanished. We looked everywhere. Guy's a ghost. Can I see the feed? From the PDR hallway, say from 7:30 to 7:45. Sure. Frank punched in the time code. The screen flickered, showing the hallway outside the private room. At 7:32 p.m., the feed showed Gregory exiting the room. He was dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief, just as Brenda had said. He looked sick. He walked toward the restroom. At 7:37 p.m., Brenda exits the room, looks around, and goes to the restroom. At 7:38 p.m., she comes out, holding the phone, panic on her face. She runs back into PDR 3. See? He went in, never came out, Frank said. He didn't come out the front, Sinclair said, her eyes narrowing. Frank, the restroom. Is there another way out? Just the service vent. It's an 8-inch square. He didn't crawl out. What about the staff hallway behind it? It doesn't connect. It's a solid wall. That's the main bank of elevators on the other side. Sinclair stared at the screen. Gregory goes in. He doesn't come out. Brenda goes in, finds the phone, and comes out. But, Frank, Sinclair said, her voice dropping, play the feed from before Gregory went in. Show me the hallway from 7:15. Frank shrugged and rewound the tape. The hallway was empty. Then, at 7:19 p.m., the feed showed Brenda, Charles's top assistant, exiting PDR 3. This was before the panic. This was when the appetizers were being served. She walked down the hall, but she didn't go to the restroom. She took a hard right into a small, carpeted alcove by the main elevator bank. A man stepped out of the shadows to meet her. Sinclair's blood turned to ice. She recognized the man. She had seen his picture in the Financial Times just last week. He wasn't some random associate. He was Martin Hewitt, Leland Hewitt's son and his chief corporate raider. The camera was too far to hear, but it was clear this was no friendly chat. It was clandestine. Brenda was agitated. Martin was calm. He passed her a small, thick envelope. Brenda looked at it, nodded, and slipped it into her jacket pocket. She looked around, then hurried back toward the PDR. Well, Frank muttered. Looks like Miss Brenda is having a word with the competition. That ain't good. Frank, Sinclair said, her mind exploding with connections. Brenda didn't find Gregory's phone. Gregory never had his phone. What are you talking about? Go back to 7:32. Watch Gregory. Frank replayed the clip. Gregory exits, mopping his brow. He's not holding his phone, Sinclair said. He goes into the bathroom. Now, watch Brenda at 7:37. Frank played it. Brenda exits, goes into the bathroom. Now watch her come out. Brenda emerges at 7:38, holding the phone. She went in there with the phone, Sinclair whispered. She planted it. She planted it to make it look like he'd vanished. But where did he go? Frank said. He must have left earlier. But how? Sinclair's eyes scanned the monitors. The service elevator. Show me the feed for the service elevator. Frank switched the feed. This one was grainy. He rewound. At 7:25 p.m., there, a man in a waiter's uniform, his back to the camera, pushing a large covered linen cart into the elevator. He's wearing a baseball cap pulled low. So? That's just room service, Frank said. Frank, look at his shoes, Sinclair said. The man in the waiter's uniform was wearing expensive, polished brown leather loafers, not the non-slip black monstrosities the entire staff was required to wear. That's him, Sinclair breathed. That's Gregory. Brenda gave him a uniform and a bribe. He staged his illness, walked into the bathroom, and slipped out a side door into the service corridor while everyone was focused on the appetizers. He dumped his cart and was gone. The panic attack was a ghost story. It was a setup. The entire thing. Brenda and Leland Hewitt had orchestrated Gregory's disappearance to sabotage the deal. They wanted Charles to panic, to insult the Russians, and for the deal to collapse. Hewitt would then swoop in and pick up the pieces. "My God," Frank said. "She's a corporate spy." Sinclair leaned against the wall, her head spinning. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place, and the picture they made was terrifying. Brenda's plan was pure, simple sabotage. She was a mole for Hewitt. She orchestrated Gregory's disappearance, knowing it would kill the deal. She would let Charles fail, then collect her massive payout from Hewitt, and move on. But Brenda's plan, her perfect, treacherous plan, had been completely and totally derailed. By a waitress. She had never, in a million years, calculated that the girl pouring the water spoke flawless, nuanced Russian. Sinclair looked at the monitor. She saw Brenda in PDR-3, laughing nervously at Charles's joke. She looked like a woman who had just seen her entire future go up in flames, all while having to smile and applaud the person who lit the match. "Sinclair," Frank asked, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen something worse, Frank," Sinclair said, pushing off the wall. "I've seen the truth. Don't say anything about this. Not to anyone. This is my leverage." "Leverage? Sinclair, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to get paid," Sinclair said. She walked out of the security room, straightening her apron. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. When Sinclair re-entered to the private dining room, the atmosphere had cooled. The dessert plates, a rich chocolate lava cake, were being cleared. Mr. Volkov was looking at his watch. "Ah, Sinclair," Charles boomed. He'd had 2 glasses of champagne and was flushed with victory. "We were just talking about you. I was just telling Nikolai, that girl's got moxie." Sinclair smiled, a thin, professional expression. "You are too kind, sir." "Kind? I'm grateful. You saved my bacon in there," Charles said, lowering his voice. "Look, this waitress thing, it's ridiculous. A woman of your talents. I'm going to make this right." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, Brioni leather checkbook and a Mont Blanc pen. "Brenda, what's a generous tip? 5,000? Is that tacky?" I'm sure whatever you think is appropriate, sir," Brenda said, her voice strained. "No, not a tip. A bonus," Charles declared. He scribbled, tore out the check, and folded it. "Here, $10,000, for services rendered." He tried to press it into her hand. Sinclair did not take it. She didn't even look at it. She kept her hands clasped behind her back. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the table. "I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept." Charles's smile froze. "What? It's 10 grand. Tax-free. Take it." "A bonus implies I am your employee, sir." "I am not," Sinclair said. "Well, you are now. I'm hiring you, starting tomorrow. You'll be my personal translator. I'll double whatever you're making here. Triple it. Brenda, what's her salary?" Brenda looked at Sinclair with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Sir, she's a contract server. She makes $22 an hour, plus tips." "Right. Well, I'll pay you. $100,000 a year. How's that? My personal translator. You travel with me. Private jets. The whole 9 yards." Charles was beaming, as if bestowing kingship. Mr. Volkov was watching this exchange with the quiet focus of a chess master. Sinclair finally met Charles's eyes. Her gaze was not grateful. It was not intimidated. It was level. "Mr. Beaumont, I am not a translator," she said. "What? Of course you are. You're the best I've ever seen." "No, sir. A translator is a tool, like that app on your phone, only better. I am not a tool. I am a linguist, a strategist, and an analyst. What I did in this room tonight was not translation. I navigated a cultural minefield. I de-escalated a diplomatic crisis, and I salvaged a $500 million joint venture. A translator would have told you Mr. Volkov was insulted. I told you why, and I told you how to fix it. A translator would have relayed your 70-30 offer. I knew to accept his 65-35 compromise to secure the deal. The room was silent again. Charles's face had lost its ruddy, victorious glow. I am not for hire for $100,000 a year, Sinclair continued, and I am certainly not for hire as your personal translator. That position is insufficient. Charles was speechless. This was insubordination on a level he had never encountered. Brenda, however, saw an opening. "Sir, if I may," she interjected, her voice dripping with false concern. "This has been a very exciting night for Miss Mitchell. Perhaps she is overwhelmed. Maybe we should just thank her for her help and let her get back to her duties." Sinclair turned her head slowly to look at Brenda. It was the first time she had acknowledged her all night. "Thank you, Brenda," Sinclair said, her voice sweet. "But I'm not overwhelmed. I'm just processing. For instance, I'm processing how a top-tier translator like Gregory on the biggest deal of the year could have such a convenient panic attack." Brenda's face went white. "And I'm processing," Sinclair continued, her gaze hardening, "how he could vanish from a locked bathroom, leaving his phone behind, while his coat was still at coat check." Charles, who had been focused on his own embarrassment, now swiveled his head. "What? What are you talking about?" "It was a very stressful situation, Sinclair," Brenda said, attempting a laugh. "He just snapped. It happens." "Does it?" Sinclair said. "Or was it planned? A man like Martin Hewitt, seems like the kind of person who could induce that storage of panic, with the right incentive." Brenda stopped breathing. Charles's eyes, dull from champagne, suddenly became laser sharp. "Hewitt? What does Hewitt have to do with this?" "I'm sure Brenda knows," Sinclair said, looking directly at the assistant. "She was meeting with him in the elevator alcove at 7:19 p.m. He gave her an envelope. I'm guessing it wasn't a Christmas card." Brenda stumbled back, knocking into a service trolley. You're lying! That's insane!" "Frank in security has the tape," Sinclair said calmly. "He also has the feed of Gregory, in a waiter's uniform and a baseball cap, taking the service elevator down at 7:25 p.m., 10 minutes before he disappeared. It was a very good plan, Brenda. Bribe Gregory. Kill the deal. Get your massive payout from Hewitt. You just didn't account for me." Charles Beaumont rose from his chair. He was not yelling. His voice was a terrifying low whisper. "Brenda. Sir, she's making it up. She's trying to extort you." Brenda was sobbing now, her facade crumbling. "Is she?" Charles said. "Empty your pockets." "Sir, empty your pockets. Now." Shaking, Brenda reached into her jacket pocket, the same pocket Sinclair had seen on the monitor. Brenda pulled out her hand. It was empty. "See?" Brenda cried, a note of triumph in her voice. "Nothing. She's a liar." Charles looked at Sinclair, his eyes dark with suspicion. Sinclair smiled. "A good try, Brenda. But a linen closet is a very cliché hiding place, especially the one right next to the alcove. I checked on my way back from security." Sinclair reached into her own apron pocket. She pulled out a thick, white Aegis Club envelope. She didn't open it. She just placed it on the polished mahogany table. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. It was full of cash. Brenda let out a sound like a dying animal. Charles stared at the envelope. He looked at Brenda, his face a mask of pure, cold fury. He looked at Sinclair, his face a mask of awe. Mr. Volkov, who had understood none of the English, understood all of the drama. He leaned over to his aide. "Please translate what just happened." While the aide quietly brought Mr. Volkov up to speed, Charles pressed a button on a small console on the table. "Security," he said. Two large men in black suits who had been standing outside the door entered immediately. "Sir?" "Escort Miss Collins," Charles said, nodding at Brenda. "From the building. Do not let her collect her things. My head of security will meet her at her apartment. She is terminated." "Sir! Charles! Please!" Brenda shrieked. 10 years! I gave you 10 years! And you tried to sell me out for... what? A few $1,000s? Charles sneered. "It was 50,000! Brenda screamed as the guards took her arms. "And it would have been more when Hewitt closed the deal. You deserved it, you arrogant..." The guards dragged her from the room. The door shut. The silence that fell was profound. Charles Beaumont slowly sat back down. He picked up the envelope of cash. He picked up the $10,000 check he had written. He looked at both. Then he looked at Sinclair. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice raw. "Yes, Mr. Beaumont? I believe we need to discuss your compensation package." Sinclair finally smiled, a real smile. "I believe we do, but not here, and not tonight." She pulled a cheap pen and a guest check card from her apron pocket. She wrote her name and phone number on it. "You have the restaurant manager's file on me. It includes my resume and my academic transcripts. I suggest you read them, both of them. Then, have your lawyers call me in the morning to schedule a meeting. I'll be bringing my own." She placed the card on the table, next to the envelope of cash. "But who are you?" Charles asked, genuinely bewildered. "I'm Sinclair Mitchell," she said. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the service station. "And I'm the new head of international strategy and acquisitions for Beaumont Innovations. I'll let you know what my salary is after I've reviewed your quarterly reports." She turned to Mr. Volkov and inclined her head. "Gospodin Volkov, it was a true honor. I look forward to working with you on the Volkov-Beaumont initiative." Mr. Volkov stood and gave her a deep, respectful nod. "Do vstrechi, Miss Mitchell. Until we meet again." Sinclair nodded. She walked to the door, her back straight, her $30 shoes clicking on the floor. She didn't look back. The next 48 hours were a blur. Sinclair's phone, a 5-year-old model with a cracked screen, nearly melted. The first call was at 6:01 a.m. the next morning. It wasn't Charles. It was Mr. Volkov's personal aide. "Ms. Mitchell," the aide said in English. Mr. Volkov was exceptionally impressed. "He has instructed me to tell you that should your discussions with Mr. Beaumont prove unsatisfactory, there is a senior executive position waiting for you at his firm in Moscow. He said to tell you, a good mind should not be wasted on a bad master." Sinclair thanked him, her hand shaking slightly. It was her first piece of leverage. The second call at 8:30 a.m. was from a law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most powerful in New York. They represented Beaumont Innovations. They wanted to meet. At 11 also bought. Sinclair used the last of her savings to take a cab to a high-end consignment shop she knew. She sold a pair of earrings her grandmother had left her. With the $400, she bought a single, perfectly tailored, dark charcoal grey suit, a silk shell, and a pair of professional heels. She walked into the glass tower of Sullivan and Cromwell, looking not like a waitress, but like she owned the building. The meeting was in a conference room that overlooked the Statue of Liberty. 3 lawyers, all senior partners, sat on one side of a 40-foot table. On the other side sat Sinclair, alone. "Ms. Mitchell," the lead lawyer, a man named Peters, began, "Mr. Beaumont has apprised us of the situation. Your assistance last night was invaluable. He is prepared to offer you the position of Vice President of International Communications. The starting salary is $350,000, plus a signing bonus of $100,000. He slid a contract across the table. Sinclair didn't look at it. "That's a very generous offer," she said. "Unfortunately, I must decline the position. Vice President of International Communications sounds like a high-level public relations job. I am not in PR." The lawyers exchanged a look. "I'm not sure I follow," Peters said. "As I told Mr. Beaumont," Sinclair said, "I am a strategist. I saved that deal not by speaking Russian, but by understanding finance, law, and culture simultaneously. I spotted the corporate espionage. I understood the nuance of Mr. Volkov's position. I am not a communications officer." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a proposal. "The position I am accepting," she said, "is Executive Vice President, Global Strategy. I will report directly to Mr. Beaumont, and only Mr. Beaumont. The International Communications, Acquisitions and Analysis departments will report to me." Peters's jaw almost unhinged. "Ms. Mitchell, that position doesn't exist. You're talking about a C-suite adjacent role. You're 26. You have no corporate experience." "My corporate experience," Sinclair said, leaning forward, "was a 3-hour trial by fire in which I saved this firm's client $500 million and exposed a corporate spy who had been bleeding him for God knows how long. My resume, which you have, shows a 4.0 GPA from Columbia and a master's in Slavic studies, with a focus on cross-cultural negotiation. I'd say my experience is more relevant than anyone else's in your client's entire company." She stood up. "And the salary," she said, "is not $350,000. She wrote a number on a notepad. $850,000. Plus a signing bonus, she continued, to be used to settle my family's outstanding debts, which, by the way, were incurred by a predatory loan from a subsidiary of Hewitt Financial. I'm sure Mr. Beaumont would love to know I have a personal stake in dismantling his rival." The lawyers were just staring. They were sharks, but they were staring at a creature from the deep they had never seen before. "Call him," Sinclair said, gathering her new purse. Call who?" "Mr. Beaumont. He's waiting for your call. Tell him my terms, and tell him I have a 12 p.m. lunch scheduled with Mr. Volkov's representatives. He has until 11:45 to make a decision." She walked out of the room. She didn't go to lunch. She went to a coffee shop across the street, her heart beating so hard she thought it would burst. She ordered a black coffee and watched the clock on her phone. 11:30 a.m. 11:40 a.m. 11:44 a.m. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Mitchell, this is Charles Beaumont." His voice was rough. "You are the most arrogant, insane, manipulative, brilliant person I have ever met." Sinclair waited. "My lawyers say you're extorting me." "I'm not, Mr. Beaumont. I'm just applying for a job I've already proven I can do." There was a long pause. She heard him sigh. It was a sound of complete and utter defeat. "My car will be outside your apartment tomorrow at 7 a.m., he growled. "Don't be late. And Sinclair?" "Yes, Mr. Beaumont? Welcome to Beaumont Innovations." He hung up. Sinclair closed her eyes. She took a sip of her coffee. It was bitter and cold, and the best thing she had ever tasted. 1 month later. The Aegis Club, private dining room 3. The room was the same. The polished table, the view of Central Park, the scent of money and beeswax. This time, however, Sinclair Mitchell was not standing by the service station. She was sitting at the head of the table. She was wearing a dark blue Acris suit that she had paid for with her own, new, very impressive salary. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her laptop was open. Across from her sat Charles Beaumont. He was quieter. He was listening. "The due diligence on the Frankfurt deal is sloppy," Sinclair said, not looking up from her screen. "Their projections are based on an outdated EU regulation. It's a non-starter. We kill the deal." "Kill it?" Charles protested. "That's $90 million. "It's a $90 million loss," Sinclair corrected. "They're hiding debt, right here." She turned the laptop around. "Page 48, their liability clause. They're using a shell corporation in Malta to hide their pension obligations." Charles read it. A slow, impressed grin spread across his face. "That sneaky son of a... How did you find that?" "I speak German," Sinclair said simply. "And I read. It's what you pay me for." The door opened. A server, a new girl Sinclair didn't recognize, came in. "More water, Miss Mitchell? Mr. Beaumont?" "Thank you, Jessica," Sinclair said, smiling at the girl. The girl looked startled that Sinclair knew her name. "Yes, thank you," Charles mumbled, not looking up. As the server poured the water, Charles looked at Sinclair. "That relationship with Volkov, it's solid gold. He already approved the 70-30 split, said it was a gesture of respect to you." "He respects competence, Charles," Sinclair said, sipping her water. "He now sees us as competent." Right. Charles leaned back. "You know, Hewitt is furious. He fired his son. And Brenda, I heard she's working as a hostess at a steakhouse in New Jersey." "That's a shame," Sinclair said, without a trace of shame. "This is better," Charles said, gesturing around the room. "This is right. You here. Me here." "It's a start," Sinclair said, closing her laptop. "Now, about the Singapore expansion. I have some notes." Sinclair looked out the window. It was the same view she had seen 100 times from the service station. The same park, the same city. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't just looking at it. She was a part of it. Mr. Volkov had been right. A wolf is still a wolf. But he'd been wrong about one thing. Sinclair wasn't a lamb. She was just a different kind of wolf, one who had been swimming in the shallows, waiting for the right time to show her teeth. And she was, she realized, very, very hungry. And so, Sinclair Mitchell's life changed forever. Not by magic, not by luck, but by one moment of impossible bravery, backed up by years of thankless, invisible work. She wasn't just a waitress who spoke Russian. She was a brilliant mind trapped in the wrong uniform. The story isn't about her saving Charles Beaumont. It's about her finally saving herself. It just goes to show the most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest one. It's the one nobody sees, the one who is watching, the one who is listening, the one who is waiting. What did you think of Sinclair's ultimate power move? Was Charles a shark who learned his lesson? Or will he always be a villain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this journey from the service station to the boardroom, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own hidden power, and of course, subscribing to the channel for more stories of drama, revenge, and justice. We have new stories coming every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next.